One introduction Rosep view the United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only. For home building and furniture building, for just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lungs, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove, and International Convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosep view purple air PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.
Hi, my name is Lily. Andrew gave you the intro to residents against wood smoke emission particulates and their concern for air pollution from indoor residential wood burning. Residents against wood smoke emission particulates, or ROSEP, would like every near neighbor of an indoor residential wood burner whose wood smoke enters their yards and sickens the near neighbors to have a purple air PM 2.5 monitor hanging from the eaves of their home to measure the level of PM 2.5 entering their yards. That measurement of air pollution should be used as evidence of unnecessary air pollution, and each indoor residential wood burner should be shut down based on that evidence, one indoor residential wood burner at a time if necessary. The presentation by Andrew ended at 2 minutes 5 seconds. The same presentation by Emma starts at 2 minutes 3 seconds before the end of this podcast. So I am Lily, your timekeeper, and you can start the next podcast at 2 minutes 5 seconds in if you would not like to see the presentation by Andrew a second time. This presentation by me, Lily, ends at 5 minutes in. What you will see in the main content of this ROSEP podcast will be news about air pollution from indoor residential wood burning and how that air pollution is being combated by ordinary people just like you who are unfortunately near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners at this time. There will also be news about unnecessary and highly polluting use of wood as fuel in industrial wood burners and preventable air pollution from wood burning wildfires. There will also be news about air pollution from PM 2.5 from gas-powered cars. There will also be news about airborne diseases which are also preventable with vaccines such as COVID-19 and measles and whooping cough, to name just a few. In 2025, residents against wood smoke emission particulates is also concerned with combating the Trump destruction of government funding for programs which protect human health through the Department of Health and Human Services, and Trump destruction of programs which fund the science and medical research plan to protect human health from preventable illnesses. Protecting human health is a patriotic act, and our defense against enemies is weakened if we are not as healthy as we can be. Heat pump rebates are now offered by the federal government, distributed through the eligible United States, are available in 2025 and are the best, cleanest, and now cheapest alternative to indoor residential wood burning if that burning is actually done to purportedly save money. Wind and solar as sources of the electricity that powers heat pumps and electric cars is also cheaper than burning wood. The adverse health effects that are caused by indoor residential wood burning also come at a cost to near neighbors, both in shortening and ending their lives and in actual hospital, clinic, and funeral costs. Instead of being compensated monetarily, near neighbors should instead be able to achieve immediate relief by stopping indoor residential wood burning in their hyper-localized neighborhoods, which relief readings from purple air PM 2.5 monitors used as evidence of air pollution will help them achieve. Welcome to news about hopeful scientific and medical achievements that will also help us achieve the goal of clean air to breathe.
Episode 57DHXXG September 10th, 2025 U.S. wildfire fighters to mask up after decades of a ban on smoke protections. In episode 57DHXXG 1 Health News 2 U.S. wildfire fighters to mask up after decades-long ban on smoke protections, 3 Hill leaders, 4 headlines main content. 1A Health News excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against with smoke emission particulates of 501c3 nonprofit organization KFF Health News September 10th, 2025 3 RFK Jr. said everybody can get a COVID vaccine. Is that true? 5 HHS report lays out health priorities for kids omits biggest cause of death, which is gun violence. 6 U.S. death rate fell 4% in 2024. COVID no longer a top 10 cause. CDC says 8 CDC infectious disease data project put on hold indefinitely. State Watch 9 wildfire fighters will now be provided with masks for smoke protection from KFF Health News. KFF Health News original. Stories 3 RFK Jr. said everybody can get a COVID vaccine. Is that true? Although the FDA has approved the vaccines for anyone 65 or older and anyone at least 6 months old who is at risk of a severe COVID infection, barriers to coverage and access persist. Grace Abels PolitiFact and Maria Ramirez Uribe PolitiFact September 10th Public Health 5 HHS report lays out health priorities for kids omits biggest cause of death. HHS Chief RFK Jr. on Tuesday released the Make Our Children Healthy Again plan, which mentions several dozen issues that the federal government aims to tackle, such as poor diet, chemical exposures, and excess prescription medications, but the report did not mention gun violence, which is the leading cause of death for people younger than 18. RFK Jr. releases Maha report on fighting childhood chronic disease. The final version looks markedly similar to the draft that made rounds and garnered heavy criticism in recent weeks, but with more detail. Cueto and Todd September 9th firearms have been the leading cause of death for children ages 1 to 17 every year since 2022. More than 2,500 kids died from gunshot wounds in 2022, the last year for which complete data is available, and guns were responsible for 30% of all deaths of 15 to 17-year-olds. The Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions found after analyzing data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention gun control absence from the Maha strategy raised alarm among pediatricians and public health experts. Pirtle September 9th. The 19th, the EPA ended her research into how climate change endangers children. Jane Clougherty has dedicated the majority of her professional life to researching the health effects of air pollution and more recently extreme heat, but in May she got an email from the Environmental Protection Agency EPA that ground her potentially life-saving work to a halt. Cuts September 9th. COVID-19 6 U.S. death rate fell 4% in 2024. COVID no longer a top 10 cause. CDC says heart disease and cancer remain the leading causes of death, a report indicates, but overdoses and other unintentional injuries along with suicides ticked up last year. CNN U.S. death rate dropped back to pre-COVID levels in 2024. CDC report says the death rate in the United States returned to pre-pandemic levels in 2024 as COVID-19 fell out of the top 10 leading causes of death, according to a report published Wednesday by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. McPhillips September 10th. More news about COVID and vaccines. MedPage Today Physicians Group recommends all adults get a COVID booster. The American Academy of Family Physicians AFP split with federal health officials and recommended that all U.S. adults get an updated COVID-19 vaccine for the upcoming respiratory virus season, in particular people 65 years or older, those at increased risk for severe outcomes, and anyone who has never received a COVID-19 shot before should be prioritized for vaccination, AFP said. Rudd September 9th. San Francisco Chronicle. California rejects CDC backs medical groups on COVID vaccines in a break from the past. California is endorsing COVID-19 vaccine recommendations from national medical professional organizations rather than federal health officials. State public health departments typically adopt vaccine recommendations from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which takes their cues from a scientific advisory panel composed of experts who specialize in vaccines and infectious diseases. Host September 9th. CIDRAP. Pfizer reports strong phase 3 clinical data for 2025-26 COVID vaccine. Yesterday, Pfizer and BioNTech reported phase 3 clinical trial data for their updated COVID vaccine. Comirnaty. That vaccine is authorized for use by the Food and Drug Administration FDA for seniors 65 and older and for younger adults with at least one underlying health condition. The data show at least a 4-fold increase in neutralizing antibodies, reinforcing preclinical data, and Pfizer has submitted these data to the FDA. Sushere September 9th. RFK Jr. said everybody can get a COVID vaccine. Is that true? When Health Secretary RFK Jr. testified before the Senate Finance Committee on September 4th, several senators criticized him for restricting the COVID-19 shots after promising in November he would not take away vaccines from anybody. Did you hold up a big sign saying that you were lying when you said that? Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, asked RFK Jr. Abels and Ramirez Uribe September 10th. The Washington Post, how to find a COVID vaccine without a prescription. Getting an updated coronavirus vaccine can be particularly challenging this year. The Food and Drug Administration approved those shots for people who are 65 and older or have underlying conditions that elevate their risk of severe disease, narrowing the pool of Americans who have easy access to the shots. Ovalle September 9th. CIDRAP studies show how common long COVID is globally, and in teens long COVID, the post-infection condition that can encompass a number of symptoms in the weeks following an active COVID-19 infection, is shown to be highly prevalent. In a new global analysis of studies published in Open Forum Infectious Diseases, CIDRAP dogs exposed to COVID-positive people show increased risk of infection. A surveillance survey published in Virus Research finds an almost 70% elevated prevalence of SARS-CoV-2 antibodies in the blood of pet dogs exposed to the virus in their homes. Van Buescom CDC Infectious Disease Data Project put on hold indefinitely. The user-friendly website would have made access to information on numerous diseases readily accessible. Also, ex-CDC Chief Susan Minares will testify at a Senate committee hearing on September 17th. MedPage Today. CDC Infectious Disease Data Project shelved. HHS has put on ice a CDC project that would make information about dozens of diseases available in near real-time. CDC sources told MedPage Today since early summer the team has been working on a more user-friendly website that would make case counts on 120 27 notifiable conditions available in one place alongside expert commentary, but when they asked for approval to launch it, HHS put it on hold indefinitely, several sources said. Fiore, September 9, former CDC director, will tell her side to Senators, NBC News, former CDC Director Susan Menarez to testify at Senate committee hearing. The Senate committee that oversees the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will hold a hearing next week with testimony from former CDC Director Susan Menarez, whom the Trump administration abruptly fired last month after she refused to resign under pressure. The hearing before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee chaired by Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, will take place September 17th and focus on oversight of the CDC. Leach, Thorpe v. and Richards, September 10th. 1B Health News excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to residents against wood smoke emission particulates. A 501c3 nonprofit organization. KFF Health Newsletter, September 8th, 2025. In this edition, KFF Health News original stories. 2 researchers shift tactics to tackle extremism as public health threat. 3 journalists discuss fallout of CDC turmoil and recap bitter RFK Jr. Senate hearing. 4 on Capitol Hill, RFK Jr. defends firings at CDC Public Health. 5 RFK Jr. expected to tie Tylenol use during pregnancy with autism vaccines. 6 Trump defends COVID and polio vaccines while also defending RFK Jr. Health industry. 10 although still a threat, mpox is not a global health emergency. Who says state watch? 11 Texas parental consent law leaves school nurses in limbo over care. Editorials and opinions. Parkinson's is linked to pollutants. From KFF Health News. KFF Health News original stories. 3 journalists discuss fallout of CDC turmoil and recap bitter RFK Jr. Senate hearing. KFF Health News journalists made the rounds on national and local media recently to discuss topical stories. Here is a collection of their appearances. September 6th, 4th. KFF Health News. What the Health? On Capitol Hill, RFK Jr. defends firings at CDC. A combative RFK Jr., the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, appeared before a Senate committee Thursday, defending his firing of the newly confirmed director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as other changes that could limit the availability of vaccines. Meanwhile, Congress has only a few weeks to complete work on annual spending bills to avoid a possible government shutdown and to ward off potentially large increases in premiums for Affordable Care Act health plans. 5 Autism Science Foundation statement from Autism Science Foundation regarding Wall Street Journal report. Any association between acetaminophen and autism is based on limited, conflicting, and inconsistent science and is premature. Given the current science, autism does not have a single cause. It is the result of a complex mix of genetics and environment. We know that genetic factors play the biggest role. Hundreds of genes have been linked to autism, and inherited or spontaneous changes in these genes can alter brain development. It is disingenuous and misleading to boil the causes of autism down to one simple thing, said Dr. Alicia Halliday, Chief Science Officer at the Autism Science Foundation. September 5th. Science Daily. Autism symptoms vanish in mice after Stanford brain breakthrough. Scientists at Stanford have found that hyperactivity in the reticular thalamic nucleus of the brain may drive autism, like behaviors in mouse models. Drugs and neuromodulation techniques that suppressed this overactive region reversed symptoms, hinting at new therapeutic pathways that overlap with epilepsy treatments. September 8th. Vaccines. 6 Trump defends COVID and polio vaccines while also defending RFK Jr. Meanwhile, among some GOP lawmakers, doubts linger over HHS Secretary RFK Jr. Also the difficulties in getting a COVID shot. The Florida plan to drop school vaccine rules. Current COVID levels in America. Politico. Trump is back to touting his COVID shot a day after senators of both parties rebuked his health secretary RFK Jr. for restricting access to COVID vaccines. At a congressional hearing, President Donald Trump praised them along with some other shots during an Oval Office event. A lot of people think that COVID is amazing, Trump said, referencing the vaccine, not the disease. You know, there are many people that believe strongly in that pawn. September 5th. The Hill. Trump defends RFK Jr. He is a different kind of a guy. President Trump on Sunday defended Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr., who has come under increasing criticism from Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill over his handling of vaccines. Trump has given conflicting messages over the last several days about RFK Jr. defending his cabinet member while also defending vaccines, including those for polio and COVID. Swanson. September 7th. Doubts about RFK Jr. grow for some Republicans 7 months after they voted to confirm longtime anti-vaccine activist RFK Jr. as the American Health Secretary. Some Republican senators are having second thoughts. I am a doctor. Vaccines work. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming, the number 2 Republican in the Senate, told RFK Jr. at a hearing Thursday on Capitol Hill. Secretary RFK Jr., in your confirmation hearings you promised to uphold the highest standards for vaccines. Since then, I have grown deeply concerned. Diamond Meyer and Rabin. September 7th. AP. The RFK Jr. family members call him threat to the health of Americans and want him to resign. Members of the RFK Jr. family are calling for him to step down as health secretary following a contentious congressional hearing this past week, during which the Trump cabinet official faced bipartisan questioning about his tumultuous leadership of federal health agencies. The RFK sister Kerry Kennedy and his nephew Joseph P. Kennedy III issued scathing statements Friday calling for him to resign as head of the Health and Human Services Department. September 6th. On vaccine access. NBC News. For some, Medicare is not covering the updated COVID vaccine, yet some older Americans on Medicare are facing an unexpected problem. The updated COVID shots approved last month by the Food and Drug Administration for all adults 65 and up are not being covered, forcing them to decide whether to pay out of pocket. Allison Engel, 74, said she visited her CVS in Pasadena, California on Tuesday, where she was told the shot would cost $225 out of pocket. They typed everything in and handed me a rejection letter. Engel said they told me it was not in the Medicare system yet, and I should come back in 2 weeks. Lovelace Jr. September 5th. The Washington Post. COVID vaccines difficult to find for many Americans despite the RFK Jr. assurances. Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. told senators last week that anyone can get a new coronavirus vaccine, but many Americans are finding the opposite. Confusion is rippling through the healthcare system as pharmacies and doctors try to adjust to providing a vaccine that is no longer broadly recommended. American experiences vary widely, from easily booking appointments to having to cross state lines to access the shots according to more than 3,200 submissions to request for readers of the Washington Post to share their experiences. Ovalle and Winfield Cunningham, September 7th. AP, the Florida plan to drop school vaccine rule will not start for 90 days. The Florida plan to drop school vaccine mandates likely will not take effect for 90 days and would include only chickenpox and a few other illnesses, unless lawmakers decide to extend it to other diseases like polio and measles. The Health Department said Sunday the department responded to a request for details 4 days after the Florida Surgeon General Dr. Joseph Ladapo said the state would become the first to make vaccinations voluntary and let families decide whether to inoculate their children. White, September 7th. CNN, West Virginia has the best kindergarten vaccination rates in the nation. A legal fight backed by RFK Jr. could threaten that when it comes to health. West Virginia is used to being on the wrong end of the numbers, but on childhood vaccination rates, it is a standout. During the 2023 to 2024 school year, more than 98% of kindergartners in West Virginia were vaccinated against diseases such as measles, pertussis, and chickenpox, making it first in the nation, according to data from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Goodman, September 5th. CIDRAP. U.S. COVID levels may be peaking. CDC data show COVID-19 appears to be peaking in many parts of the country amid low respiratory illness activity overall, according to the Respiratory Illness Update today from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Nationally, the CDC COVID-19 surveillance data show test positivity for SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, is 10.8% down from the peak last week of 11.6%, but the percentage of emergency department visits diagnosed as COVID-19 rose slightly from 1.5% to 1.6% and are elevated in children ages 0 to 4 and 5 to 17 years. September 5th. Also KFF Health News. KFF Health News. What the health? On Capitol Hill, RFK Jr. defends firings at CDC just days after his firing of the brand new director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. A defiant RFK Jr., the U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, defended that action and others before a sometimes skeptical Senate Finance Committee. Criticism of the RFK Jr. increasingly anti-vaccine actions came not just from Democrats on the panel, but from some Republicans who are also medical doctors. Rovner, September 5th. KFF Health News. KFF Health News. On air, journalists discuss fallout of CDC turmoil and recap bitter RFK Senate hearing. Celine Gounder, KFF Health News editor at large for Public Health, discussed recommendations for COVID-19 vaccinations for children on the NPR Morning Edition on August 20th. Gounder then discussed the infant mortality crisis in Mississippi on CBS Evening News Plus on August 22nd. She also discussed the resignation of top Centers for Disease Control and Prevention officials after the ousting of agency director Susan Menares on CBS News. CBS Mornings on August 28th. September 6th. Health industry. 7 Walgreens private equity deal may mean closures threaten patient access. As part of the deal, Walgreens will be split into 5 privately owned companies, but experts warn that private equity takeovers often mean store closures, reduced staffing, and prescription errors. Sycamore Partners has no background in healthcare or retail pharmacy. Also, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, warns the buyout may run the company into the ground. Healthcare brew. Walgreens private equity takeover may bring layoffs. Pharmacy closures. Experts warn Walgreens has completed a deal to be bought by private equity firm Sycamore Partners, and pharmacy experts are worried it will bring with it layoffs and pharmacy closures. Rumors of the takeover began swirling last December, and Walgreens executives confirmed in March they had signed a definitive agreement with Sycamore. As part of the deal, Walgreens and its subsidiaries are to be split into 5 separate privately owned companies. Retail pharmacy chain Walgreens, pharmaceutical wholesaler The Boots Group, specialty pharmacy company Shields Health Solutions, after-acute care company CareCentrix, and primary care clinic chain Village. MD Anderson, September 5th. Yahoo Finance. Elizabeth Warren warns about the Walgreens takeover, saying private equity has a record of running companies into the ground. Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, is sounding the alarm over Walgreens Boots Alliance $10 billion sale to private equity firm Sycamore Partners. The company has already been struggling, and Warren says the buyout could make things much worse for workers and customers alike. Walgreens just got taken over by private equity. Private equity has a record of running companies into the ground, Warren said last week in a post on X. She warned that Walgreens could be the latest victim, closing more stores, service plummeting, workers losing their jobs, and eventually bankruptcy. Volinick, September 5th. More health industry news. Bloomberg Medicare plan to hire 2,000 auditors appears to stall. The U.S. government appears to be behind on its goal of hiring staff to audit private Medicare Advantage insurance plans for potential overpayments, casting doubt on how quickly it can clear years-long backlog that the new administration promised to tackle. In May, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services said it would hire about 2,000 medical coders by September 1st to verify the data insurers submit for payment in the health insurance program of the government for the elderly. This would be an increase from the 40 people the agency already had in place. Tazi, September 5th. Modern healthcare banner. Health layoffs, relocations to affect 351 employees. Banner. Health plans to lay off or relocate 351 employees in Colorado as the nonprofit health system restructures its acute care and outpatient networks. Nurses account for about a quarter of the displaced workers, according to a Thursday Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act filing. Physicians, certified patient care assistants, and ultrasound technologists are among dozens of other affected roles. Kochik, September 5th. Modern Healthcare. Aetna, Optum Health finalized dummy code settlement fee. Aetna and Optum will pay $8.4 million to settle a class action lawsuit alleging they used dummy codes that increased out-of-pocket costs of members. The U.S. District Court for the Western District of North Carolina approved the agreement Thursday. The companies and the lead plaintiff, a retiree with a self-funded Aetna employer plan named Sandra Peters, who initiated the suit in 2015, agreed to settle in November. Coming to terms on the payout brings the case to a close. Tong, September 5th. Modern Healthcare. The prior authorization companies ready to take on insurers. Providers are doubling down on artificial intelligence, seeking to better arm themselves in the battle over prior authorizations against insurers that have invested heavily in the technology. Major insurers such as United Health Group, Cigna, and Humana have invested heavily in AI. Providers in turn are looking to use the technology to ease prior authorization, a perpetual headache that has contributed to burnout for nearly 90% of physicians, according to a survey from the American Medical Association in February. Per September 5th, the Baltimore Sun concierge care a boon to doctors, but problematic for some patients when Annapolis resident Maria Pitarelli began pursuing concierge primary care for her mother. She quickly came down with an acute case of sticker shock. The idea behind concierge is that primary care doctors can charge a membership fee so that they can see fewer patients for relatively the same amount of money, thereby allowing them to dedicate more time to each patient. However, as more practices adopt the business model, those fees can become a barrier. Rothstein, September 8th. Stat Summit Therapeutics hits possible snag on lung cancer drug scene, as blockbuster Summit Therapeutics may have a geography problem with its lung cancer drug ivonescimab in a study update reported Sunday. Patients from North America and Europe treated with the drug saw their lung cancer return and progress faster than patients from China, a discordant result that could complicate. Summit is plans to secure approval of ivonescimab in the US and Europe. Forstein, September 7th. MedPage today, GLP-1 agonists show possible benefits for rare blood cancer patients with polycythemia vera. PV and a history of treatment with GLP-1 agonists had significantly lower rates of multiple adverse outcomes associated with the disease. A large propensity match study showed over 3 years of follow-up patients who used GLP-1 agonists for diabetes or weight loss. 2 United States wildfire fighters to mask up after decades of a ban on smoke. Protection's Forest Service is changing course as it faces growing pressure over firefighters who are falling ill with cancer and other smoke-related illnesses. Excerpts edited by Rozeb for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. The New York Times, September 9th, 2025. The U.S. government is providing wildfire fighters with masks to protect against smoke, reversing a decades-long ban that exposed workers to toxins known to cause cancer and other serious diseases. The Forest Service posted new guidance on Monday acknowledging for the first time that masks can protect firefighters against harmful particles and wildfire smoke. For years, the agency had barred workers from wearing masks, arguing that they were too cumbersome for the job, but current and former officials have said the agency did not want to deal with it potentially costly consequences of admitting the long-term dangers of smoke exposure in and about face. The agency now says it has stockpiled some 80,000 N95 masks and will include them in the standard set of equipment. In all large fires, it is encouraging firefighters to mask up and even suggesting that they shave their facial hair for a better fit. Previously, they were only allowed to wear bandanas, which offer no protection against toxins. This is going to make a huge difference in protecting the health of people, said Timothy Inglesby, executive director of the nonprofit group Firefighters United for Safety, Ethics, and Ecology. The shift comes after a series of articles in the New York Times documented a growing occupational health crisis among wildfire crews as climate change makes fire season longer and more intense. Firefighters are spending more time in smoke. Many are developing cancer or lung disease at young ages, and some are dying. The Forest Service, which employs the largest share of the 40,000 wildland firefighters in America, has come under intense pressure from Congress. In the wake of that reporting, lawmakers have begun crafting safety legislation and sent the agency multiple rebuking letters. A group led by Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, asked why the agency had continued to ignore calls to give workers masks, a recommendation that researchers have been making to Forest Service since at least 1997. The Forest Service chief Tom Schultz was summoned to a House oversight hearing on Tuesday. Members of the Federal Land Subcommittee called on Schultz to better protect firefighters. We can probably do a better job, Schultz said, adding that he would work to change the culture surrounding respiratory protection at the agency. Some firefighters have been resistant to introducing masks, seeing them as a sign of weakness. Got a confidential news tip? The New York Times would like to hear from readers who want to share messages and materials with our journalists. See how to send a secure message at newyorktimes.com. Tips: the new guidance encourages masks for light duty. They remain banned during arduous work, like digging trenches to contain wildfires, because the Forest Service says they may cause overheating, but permission to wear them at all is a major step, Inglesby said, noting that his worst exposures as a Forest Service firefighter had come while traveling old logging roads choked with smoke. I wish I had had the option to wear a mask, he said. The new mask policy is part of a flurry of safety improvements for wildfire workers. The organization that develops the Fire Safety Standards of America posted an emergency rule last week intended to help protect firefighters from smoke, even while they are doing grueling fire line work. That group, the National Fire Protection Association, will now allow the certification of facial coverings that offer more protection than cotton bandanas but are not sealed respirators like N95s. Fire agencies across the country generally prohibit gear that is not approved by the association, so the change paves the way for firefighters to use better ventilated coverings like neck gaiters with built-in filters. People might say this is just a band-aid, but right now we have an open wound and we have to do something, said Rick Swan, who represents the International Association of Firefighters, a labor union. Swan said manufacturers were already getting in touch to get their products certified against the new standard. In an internal memo, the Forest Service said it was exploring how it might allow masks during arduous work, which officials say carries the risk of heat stroke. That change may require the development of new respirator technology. The agency has begun drawing up a budget for a full mandatory mask program. It is also exploring ways to filter smoke from the cabins of heavy equipment like bulldozers used to contain fires in California. State regulators may soon require an even bigger change. This week, the State Division of Occupational Safety and Health began circulating a draft proposal that would require employers to provide wildland firefighters with half or full face respirator masks, which have built-in filters. The requirement would extend to so-called contract firefighters who are employed by private companies. The government hires to shore up its ranks. The proposal also suggests mandating regular lung capacity testing to monitor damage. Safety officials are expected to meet later this month with fire agencies, including representatives from the Forest Service, to kick off a rule-making process. Congress is weighing additional changes to improve the health of firefighters. The Times reported that when wildland firefighters fall ill with cancers linked to smoke exposure, many have a hard time funding their Treatment: one of them, Fernando Allende, 33, developed an aggressive cancer in his lungs this year. He attributed his illness to the time he spent in January fighting the Los Angeles fires without a mask. He filed for workers' compensation, but had to skip chemotherapy as his claim was held up. Last month, Senator Adam Schiff, Democrat of California, intervened in the case, and the Allende claim was approved. Allende said he was grateful for the help, but also frustrated by the delay. It should not have taken an act of Congress, he said. Schiff said he was developing a bill to improve respiratory protection and smoke research for wildland firefighters. Fernando, and so many like him, are heroes, and I want each of them to know that we have their back, he said in a statement. The thousands of firefighters who work on contract with the federal government will also be provided with masks. The Times reported that these workers often go without coverage when they get sick, unlike federal firefighters who are supposed to get workers' compensation benefits for smoke-related cancers and lung disease. Because of a 2022 law, the congressman who introduced that law, Representative Salud Carbajal, Democrat from California, said that more must be done to ensure firefighters across the board are getting access to the care they need and deserve. Free Hill Leaders excerpts edited by Rozep for brevity and clarity in relationship to Residents Against Wood Smoke Emission Particulates, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Axios, September 9, 2025. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and DSCC Chair Kirsten Gillibrand, Democrat of New York, have preferred candidates in Michigan, Maine, and Iowa, but Senator Bernie Sanders, Independent of Vermont, still the vanguard of the American left, is campaigning for insurgents on a megawatt scale. Schumer is reported to prefer Representative Haley Stevens in Michigan and Maine. He is urging Governor Janet Mills D. Maine to run, and in Iowa, leaders are partial to State Representative Josh Turek. The new group of progressives includes former public health official Abdul El Sayed in Michigan, an oyster farmer and military veteran Graham Plattner in Maine, and car mechanic and Marine veteran Nathan Sage in Iowa. Schumer and House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries have signaled they want a reversal of some healthcare provisions in the One Big Beautiful bill in exchange for Democratic votes. Jeffries told his members he is willing to reach a solution to the government funding impasse, but not at the expense of the health care of Americans. Members broadly agreed that Democrats should not give in without any of their demands being met. 4 headlines. The New York Times, September 10, 2025. Air pollution from wood burning. Climate change opinion. Changing clouds may tell us something about climate change. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning. Rozep view. Murder and setting a house on fire. From the article headline: Suspect in fiery deaths of a couple went door to door asking to come in. The New York Times. Business weight loss medication Ozempic maker Novo Nordisk to cut 9,000 jobs. The New York Times. Consumers fashion street style look of the week. Bright clothes. The New York Times. Consumers headphones noise canceling and bone conduction technology, the 15 best headphones of 2025 according to our testing. Reviews by Wirecutter. Democrats. Massachusetts Boston mayor advances to general election will face political newcomer. The New York Times. Democrats. Virginia House of Representatives. James Walkinshaw, Democrat of Virginia, wins House special election. The New York Times. New York City mayoral election. Why the boss of Zoran Mamdani in the legislature refuses to endorse him. The New York Times. New York City phones. The New York ban on cell phones in schools is going better than expected. The New York Times. 9/11 tomorrow. 9/11 tomorrow. A collective video diary of 9/11 in 500 hours. The New York Times. 9/11 9/11 tomorrow. These children born after 9/11 promise to never forget. The New York Times. Republicans' opinion: they do not want to live in the America of Abraham Lincoln. The New York Times. RFK Jr. debate flares over an unproven link between Tylenol and autism. The New York Times. RFK Jr. opinion: how Maha influencers spread conspiracies about healthcare. The New York Times. RFK Jr. opinion: it is not you, it is the food. The New York Times. RFK Jr. vaccines and CDC chaos expose tensions between Trump and RFK Jr. The New York Times. RFK Jr. what is in the Maha report. The New York Times. RFK Jr. what is new in school lunchrooms? Less sugar, more from scratch. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Kimmel calls the Epstein birthday book a gift that keeps on giving. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Latest revelations complicate the Trump sweeping denials about Epstein. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. A phony Trump check and a depreciated woman in the Epstein birthday book. The New York Times. Trump actions opinion: 8 months of Trump 1 quiz. The New York Times. Trump actions. Trump moves to crack down on drug advertising. The New York Times. Trump economy opinion: Trump is treating the economy like his family business. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Protesters call out Trump as he dines out in Washington. The New York Times. Trump extortion of private companies: how Howard Lutnick is using government power to pressure private companies. The New York Times. Trump setbacks surrounding the Fed. Judge rules Fed governor can remain enrolled for now. The New York Times. Trump setbacks: one of the Trump powers over D.C. reaches a time limit, many remain. The New York Times. Trump tariffs: Trump warns of doom if tariffs are ruled illegal. Others see a tax cut. The New York Times. Trump tariffs: Trump weighs crackdown on medicines from China. The New York Times. Norway Navy gets a big boost with UK ship deal. The New York Times. France braces for protests. The New York Times. France: what travelers need to know about the upcoming strike in France. The New York Times. Germany. Hitler the Nazi. Trump ally. Rozep view: young contentious neighbor of Hitler dies. From the article headline: Edgar Feuchtwanger, who wrote about being a young neighbor of Hitler, dies at 100. The New York Times. Poland says it shot down Russian drones that entered its airspace. The New York Times. Russia: the Putin message to Ukraine, Europe, and Trump: I will not back down. The New York Times. Italy fascist. Rozep view: Trump ally stars in a mega MAGA like play. From the article headline: and Mussolini son of the century, somebody wants to make Italy great again. MEGA. The New York Times. India investors: Trump tariffs in India. There are investors defying tariffs who keep pouring money into stocks. The New York Times. China renewable energy investment helping stem fossil fuel growth report, says the New York Times. Nepal under curfew as army patrols Kathmandu after protests. Live updates. The New York Times. Headlines: The New York Times. September 9, 2025. Air pollution from wood burning mortality masks U.S. wildfire fighters to mask up after decades-long ban on smoke protections. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning mortality masks. Wildfire fighters unmasked in toxic smoke are getting sick and dying. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning firefighters race to save a treasured Sequoia Grove in California. The New York Times. Air Pollution from wood burning and air pollution from fossil fuel burning. Exxon wants to make more of the materials needed for EV batteries. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning. Police seek suspect after firefighters find dead couple. 1 in chains. The New York Times. Art roll over Warhol, taking the 1960s beyond pop art. The New York Times. Artificial intelligence. Nvidia accuses rivals of being AI doomers as U.S. debates sale of chips to China. The New York Times. Business. Anglo-American and tech resources to merge, forming a copper giant. The New York Times. Business. The Apple iPhone 17 event. Our live updates and takeaways. Reviews by Wirecutter. Business. The Starbucks CEO trying hard to deliver your drink right and fast. The New York Times. Consumers. Food preparation. This mini food processor is my weeknight cooking hero. Reviews by Wirecutter. Democrats. New York City mayoral race. Mamdani holds huge lead in mayoral race. The Times. Siena poll finds the New York Times. Democrats. New York City mayoral race. Mamdani leads Cuomo head-to-head with a turnout twist. The New York Times. Democrats' opinion. This is what criticism of the president cost me. The New York Times. Media late night misses the Defense Department. Already the New York Times. Music. Miles Davis catalog sells to Reservoir Media, a small but savvy player. The New York Times. Nature. A new adorable deep-sea fish swims into view. The New York Times. New York City corruption. How New York police officers avoid drunk driving charges. The New York Times. New York City mayoral race to shrink. The Mamdani lead. Cuomo seeks to broaden his campaign team. The New York Times. Redistricting. Republicans. Missouri House set to vote on map that boosts Republicans. The New York Times. Republican win. Michigan judge tosses out cases against fake Trump electors. The New York Times. Republicans. Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist problem for the right. The New York Times. Republicans. Trump actions in new book think tank behind Project 2025 takes on the Constitution. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Rozep view ultra-processed foods distraction. Consumers can educate themselves and make their own decisions on what to eat based on preventive medicine and scientific facts. From the article headline. Quiz. What are ultra-processed foods? The New York Times. RFK Jr. Rozep view ultra-processed foods distraction. Consumers can educate themselves and make their own decisions on what to eat based on preventive medicine and scientific facts. From the article headline. Can you spot ultra-processed foods? Play our supermarket game. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Democrats' opinion. Stop calling it the Trump era. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Democrats' opinion. What cannot Trump wreck? The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. 5 places to turn for accurate health information. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine for a better workout. Walk with hiking poles. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. How can I reduce my risk of cancer? The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. How exercise fights anxiety and depression. The New York Times. RFK Jr. How healthy are eggs? The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. Opinion. How Maha influencers spread conspiracies about healthcare. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Democrats' opinion message to Democrats in Congress. It is time to act. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. Through exercise, Kira D'Amato discusses path from retirement to marathon records and do not call it a comeback. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. The redness and itching would not stop. Then things got dangerous. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. 7 big questions about cancer answered. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. 10 gut myths corrected. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. What are seed oils and are they actually bad for you? The New York Times. RFK Jr. Rozep view quacks rise again from the graves of COVID pandemic victims. From the article headline. What ivermectin can and cannot do. The New York Times. RFK Jr. Preventive medicine. Which foods have red dye? Number 3. What to know about the new ban of the FDA? The New York Times. Trump actions. Media. CBS taps conservative policy veteran for new ombudsman role. The New York Times. Trump actions. 12th grade reading skills hit a new low. The New York Times. Trump economy job growth revised down by nearly 1 million. Updated BLS data shows. The New York Times. Trump economy. Trump administration halts IRS crackdown on major tax shelters. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout inside the Epstein birthday book apparently signed by Trump. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump denies Epstein birthday drawing, but signature matches personal letters. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump is met with mostly booze at U.S. Open as security delays a match. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump live updates. Release of lewd Epstein book renews pressure on president. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump says having a little fight with the wife should not count as a crime. The New York Times. Trump and Epstein fallout. The Trump Treasury Secretary threatens to punch housing official in the face. The New York Times. Virginia Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin, the lone GOP governor opposing the Trump war on offshore wind. The New York Times. Brazil, the new symbol of the Brazilian right, the American flag. The New York Times. Venezuela. Trump actions. Gabbard retracted intelligence report on Venezuela. The New York Times. Australia. Lachlan Murdoch secures control of Fox and News Corp, ending succession fight. The New York Times. Australia. Who is Lachlan Murdoch, the media prince who would be king? The New York Times. France. Artificial intelligence ASML to invest $1.5 billion in Mistral, the French AI startup. The New York Times. France opinion. The government in France has fallen. It really did not have to. The New York Times. France. Macron has no good options after repeat collapse of French government. The New York Times. Germany car sales at IAA mobility car show in Munich. The German automakers feel optimistic. The New York Times. Ukraine. Russian bomb hits crowd of retirees killing at least 23. Ukraine says. The New York Times. United Arab Emirates. UAE. United Arab Emirates joins US and China in giving away AI technology. The New York Times. Nepal. The forces behind the Nepal explosive Gen Z protests. What to know. The New York Times. Nepal protests against the Nepal social media ban show resistance to a global censorship trend. The New York Times. Nepal protests live updates. Prime Minister resigns as Parliament burns. The New York Times. Japan business. In America, is America ready for Japanese-style 7-Elevens? The New York Times. Japan. Why 7-Eleven and other convenience stores in Japan are so special. The New York Times. Thailand. Thai court orders Thaksin ex-premier to serve a year in prison. The New York Times. Headlines. The New York Times. September 8, 2025. Air pollution from wood burning. Donald Trump versus the wind power industry. The New York Times. Air pollution from wood burning inside the Trump Unorthodox climate attacks in courts nationwide. The New York Times air pollution from wood burning. The New York Times Climate Forward Conference is coming soon on September 24, 2025 online and in person. The New York Times air pollution from wood burning. Scientists denounce Trump climate report. The New York Times air pollution from wood burning. White House orders agencies to escalate fight against offshore wind. The New York Times RFK Jr. climate change and health research. Cue the sun. This lab recreates hot, sweaty days to test humans. The New York Times RFK Jr. Rozep view. RFK Jr. follower in the United Kingdom. From the article headline, cardiologist draws outcry with claim tying vaccines to the cancer of the royals. The New York Times Poland and Ukraine. Rozep view historical dispute put to rest. From the article headline, a World War II dispute between Ukraine and Poland is put to rest. The New York Times headlines. The Guardian September 10, 2025 air pollution from wood burning and fossil fuel burning. Every company wants to produce the last barrel sold. The treaty to stop fossil fuel production. Fossil fuels. The Guardian air pollution from wood burning and air pollution from fossil fuel burning. Fossil fuel firms receive U.S. subsidies worth $31 billion each year. Study finds fossil fuels. The Guardian air pollution from wood burning and air pollution from fossil fuel burning. Jump in U.S. greenhouse gas pollution pushed global emissions higher. Report climate crisis. The Guardian artificial intelligence tech companies are stealing our books, music, and films for AI. It is brazen theft and must be stopped. Anna Funder and Julia Powell's. The Guardian Democrats. Gavin Newsom rebukes the Trump unhinged California obsession in State Address. California. The Guardian medicine and science. The cries of babies can make humans physically hotter. Research finds science. The Guardian Musk. What do you call the Elon Musk $1 trillion pay deal? Obscene. Arwa Madawi. The Guardian Nature. A little bit of joy. Can tiny rafts save endangered sparrows from rising seas? Birds. The Guardian Nature. Climate change. Underwater curtains and reflective beads are unrealistic and dangerous. Polar geoengineering ideas. Geoengineering. The Guardian. New Mexico becomes first state to offer free childcare for all. Model for the nation. New Mexico. The Guardian. New York City mayoral race. Binary thinking. Why the Zoran Mamdani African identity does not fit U.S. racial boxes. Zoran Mamdani. The Guardian. Republicans nostalgia. Cracker Barrel suspends remodeling plans after backlash over logo change. Restaurants. The Guardian. RFK Jr. critics decry the White House Maha report on chronic illnesses in children. Trump administration. The Guardian. RFK Jr. junk food leads to more children being obese than underweight for first time. Global health. The Guardian. RFK Jr. rinse and repeat U.S. vaccine hearing on unpublished study debates same myths. U.S. healthcare. The Guardian. RFK Jr. The Trump former Surgeon General urges president to fire RFK Jr. Guardian. RFK Jr. weight loss medication. Wegovy maker Novo Nordisk to cut 9,000 jobs amid increased competition. Pharmaceuticals industry. The Guardian. Technology. How to Save the Internet by Nick Clegg review. Spinning Silicon Valley technology. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. Pellicot case in France similar to the Epstein case. All the accused men in that court had a double life. Beatrice Savaro on defending Dominique Pellicot. Giselle Pellicot. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. The president doth protest too much. The Trump denial on Epstein is backfiring. Donald Trump. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. United Kingdom fallout from Trump and Epstein fallout. Mandelson has more very embarrassing details of Epstein friendship to come. Peter Mandelson. The Guardian. Trump and Federal Reserve. Lisa Cook to remain at Federal Reserve while fighting the Trump attempt to fire her. Judge rules Federal Reserve. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. U.S. Supreme Court clears way for Trump to withhold $5 billion in foreign aid. U.S. Supreme Court. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. U.S. Supreme Court to decide on legality of the Trump sweeping global tariffs. Trump tariffs. The Guardian. Brazil. First 2 Brazilian judges vote to convict Jair Bolsonaro in coup plot trial. Brazil. The Guardian. New Zealand crime discovery of new campsite shows fugitive Tom Phillips had outside help. And Z police say New Zealand. The Guardian. New Zealand crime hidden for nearly 4 years. How the saga of fugitive father Tom Phillips unfolded in New Zealand. New Zealand. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally Boris Johnson under pressure to explain how private office follows funding rules. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally leak exposes Washington Post boss the Will Lewis role as secret advisor to Boris Johnson while PM Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally. What are the Boris files and what do they reveal about the conduct of the former PM Boris Johnson? The Guardian. Europe. Trump tariffs. Majority of the biggest states in the EU believe bloc sold out in U.S. tariff deal. Poll finds European Union. The Guardian. France. New French PM takes office as bloc everything protests rock country. Europe Live. France. Water pollution solution. Paris cleaned up the Seine and gave swimmers a new way to beat the heat. Will your city follow suit? Helen Massey. Beresford. The Guardian. France signs near French beaches to warn against trying to reach UK immigration and asylum. The Guardian. Germany. Second World War Nazis. Rozep view. RFK Jr. of Germany. From the article headline, Walida allegedly supplied cream used on prisoners in Dachau by SS Dr. Second World War. The Guardian. Poland shoots down drones over its territory amid Russian attack on Ukraine. Poland. The Guardian. Poland PM warns prospect of military conflict closer than at any time since Second World War amid Russian drone incursion. Ukraine cooking a moment that changed me. I am a chef who joined the Ukrainian army and it transformed how I live and cook life and style. The Guardian. Ukraine. How Russia is grooming the Ukraine children to fight for it. I understood it was not just play. World News. The Guardian. Ukraine suspect in stabbing of Ukrainian woman in North Carolina charged with federal crime. North Carolina. The Guardian. Ukraine. War briefing. Russian drone alert in Poland before Belarus border closure. Ukraine. The Guardian. India and Russia. Trump reportedly asked EU to impose 100 tariffs on India and China. Russia. The Guardian. South Africa. 6 shot dead in 2 days as Cape Town reels from gang violence. South Africa. The Guardian. Indonesia. 6 dead in Bali as flash floods inundate popular tourist destination Bali. The Guardian. Qatar. Trump appears sidelined as the U.S. caught unawares of unprecedented strikes by Israel on Qatar. The Guardian headlines. The Guardian. September 9, 2025 air pollution from wood burning and air pollution from fossil fuel burning entire neighborhoods. We'll have to move Grove collides with rising seas in Charleston Sea level. The Guardian artificial intelligence, the women in love with AI companions. I vowed to my chatbot that I would not leave him artificial intelligence AI. The Guardian consumers phones Apple debuts thinner $999 iPhone Air at our dropping annual product event Apple. The Guardian human interest, who should you smile at in the street? Here are my rules. From dogs to babies. Zoe Williams. The Guardian media. Jon Stewart on Donald Trump. Something is up with his health. Late night TV roundup. The Guardian Trump actions. Racism in a Trump era. Black students flock to HBCUs where their history is not being erased, says Spelman College president. U.S. politics. The Guardian Trump actions in 2020. Trump win in court. Michigan judge dismisses charges against 15 of the Trump 2020 fake electors. U.S. politics. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. Democrats needle Trump over the Epstein birthday book letter he denied existed. Donald Trump. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. Epstein 50th birthday book. Who was in it and what did they say? Jeffrey Epstein. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. The Jeffrey Epstein 50th birthday book in pictures. U.S. News. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. Photo of novelty check suggests Epstein sold Trump a woman for $22,500. Donald Trump. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump apparently thinks domestic violence is not a crime. That makes sense. Moira Donegan. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. Trump calls release of suggestive note to convicted sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein a dead issue. Donald Trump. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. What is the truth about Trump and Epstein? The story keeps getting murkier. Arwa Madawi. The Guardian Trump and Epstein fallout. White House denies that Trump wrote Epstein letter and calls investigation. A Democrat hopes Brazil first judge in Jair Bolsonaro coup plot trial votes to convict Brazil. The Guardian. Australia. Lachlan finally has control of Murdoch empire, but deal is a win for sibling rivals Rupert Murdoch. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally Boris Johnson secretly lobbied UAE for billion-dollar private venture leak, suggests Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally call to halt Boris Johnson £115,000 allowance after Boris files revelations. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom right-wing Nigel Farage. Trump ally from Washington to Westminster. The populist right needs to erase history to succeed. It is up to us to resist Kojo Quorum. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally Putin views Queen stories and a birthday bash for a boss. The Boris Johnson. £5 million worth of paid speeches. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. Portugal. The Lisbon funicular tragedy struck a city that is struggling to balance old and new. Larry Ryan. The Guardian. France. Macron played with fire by raising the middle ground. Now France is burning jewels. Darmanin. The Guardian. Italy. Sexism. Nuns versus the Vatican documentary alleges sexual abuse and misconduct in the Catholic Church. Toronto Film Festival 2025. The Guardian. Nepal Prime Minister quits after deaths at protests sparked by social media ban. Nepal. The Guardian headlines. The Guardian. September 8, 2025 business. Amazon fires 150 unionized third-party drivers. Teamsters, says Amazon. The Guardian media. The Stephen Colbert Late Show wins first Emmy month after cancellation. News. U.S. News. The Guardian. Republicans Trump actions. Will Republicans in Congress finally stand up to Trump? Republicans. The Guardian. Republicans unions. U.S. union membership declining in right-to-work states. Report reveals U.S. unions. The Guardian. RFK Jr. as COVID surges in the U.S. Americans cannot get vaccinated. Terrified I might kill somebody. U.S. News. The Guardian. Trump actions. The Donald Trump Department of War will just deliver bloodshed and destruction. Judith Levine. The Guardian. Trump actions. Trump attacks Tom Hanks after West Point cancels event honoring actor Donald Trump. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. At least Ed Davey is taking a stand against Trump. Ed Davey. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. Crowd greets Donald Trump with boos and cheers at U.S. Open final for men. U.S. Open tennis 2025. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. Epstein estate records release could shine light on the sex trafficker connections or show nothing at all. Jeffrey Epstein. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. Mike Johnson claimed Trump was anti-Epstein informant, then retreated amid criticism. Trump administration. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. Need I list all the reasons why Trump should not get a Nobel Peace Prize? Sidney Blumenthal. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. The Trump strongman image got booze at the U.S. Open. Perhaps that was the point. U.S. Open tennis 2025. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. The U.S. Supreme Court may address the Trump tariffs. Does he want to win? Trump tariffs. The Guardian. Trump and Epstein fallout. The USTA censorship of Trump dissent at the U.S. Open is cowardly, hypocritical, and un-American. U.S. Open tennis 2025. The Guardian. Trump tariffs. Trump ally U.S. Treasury Secretary denies Trump tariffs are tax on Americans. Trump tariffs. The Guardian. Brazil. Trump ally. He is always on the attack. The Brazilian judge prosecuting Bolsonaro inspires both love and hate. Brazil. The Guardian. Venezuela. Trump actions. Republican condemns Vance for despicable comments on Venezuelan boat strike. J.D. Vance. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally revealed how Boris Johnson traded PM contacts for global business deals. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom secret meeting of Boris Johnson and Cummings with Palantir founder revealed. Boris Johnson. The Guardian. United Kingdom Trump ally. What are the Boris files, and what do they reveal about the conduct of the former PM Boris Johnson? The Guardian. Europe. EU and US officials meet as Trump says he is ready to impose further sanctions on Russia. Ukraine. The Guardian. France. Europe live. Macron labeled a defeated president as his PM faces no confidence vote. Greece announces €1.6 billion relief package to tackle population decline. Greece. The Guardian. Iran will exchange nuclear monitoring for lifted sanctions, says its foreign minister. Iran. The Guardian. Cat's corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. Saying the quiet part out loud. Roar. Hi, I am Tiger. Our human asked us to get up from our naps and start Cat's Corner strategy with Tiger and Leone. She gave us a list of internet allies which we will post for her here.
Hi, I am Leone. It is better for your mental fitness to go to these websites than to go to bro sites for advice. Substack letters from an American Heather Cox Richardson. Substack your local epidemiologist. The Midas Touch. The Guardian. The New York Times.
One introduction. Rosette view. The United States government was on track in the Biden administration to reduce the prices for both clean energy heat pumps and clean energy electric cars. Trump tariffs are expected to upset those plans to prevent future air pollution and prevent climate change. The United States government should, instead of certifying wood stoves as safe when they are not safe, go forward with regulations that ban wood stove use and direct government money for use of forest refuse only for home building and furniture building. For just a few examples of use of forest products for non-burning uses, it is well known from scientific and medical research that wood burning is a substantial source of PM 2.5 emissions, yet the wood burning industry uses the scientifically debunked theory named carbon neutrality of wood burning to argue that wood burning replacing coal burning in industry, and in a trickle-down argument that wood burning should continue for home heating should continue. Presumably because it is called renewable, wood may be renewable in the sense that a tree can be planted in the place of a cut-down burned tree, but it takes centuries or decades for the newly planted tree to attain the stature of the cut-down burned tree. During those centuries or decades, photosynthesis, which converts CO2 to oxygen, and so sequesters some carbon, will not take place at the same rate as photosynthesis was performed previously, and wood burning emits both CO2 and PM 2.5, and PM 2.5 is not absorbed by trees, so PM 2.5 is not diminished by planting a tree in the place of a cut-down and burned tree. In fact, a living tree closes its pores against the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning, just as humans hold their breath in the presence of PM 2.5 from nearby wood burning. And when a tree closes its pores, the level of photosynthesis that absorbs CO2 pollution goes down. Wood burning emits 90% PM 2.5 particulate matter of 2.5 micrometer size, the perfect size to infiltrate the human lung, setting off a cascade of human health problems and early deaths. Contrary to many beliefs, wood burning emits 2.8 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel coal burning, and wood burning emits 450 times the PM 2.5 as the fossil fuel natural gas burning. Replacing coal burning with wood burning creates more air pollution in the form of CO2 and PM 2.5 than coal burning. This emission data comes from testing the cleanest burning wood stove in the United Kingdom, the Eco-Design Wood Stove. An international convention does not count the emissions from wood burning. The emissions from wood burning are erased from all countries around the world when calculating if each country has met its climate goals. This non-counting or erasure of wood burning emissions data from climate goals does not mean wood burning emissions do not exist. Rosette view. Purple air. PM 2.5 monitors hanging from the eaves of the house of a near neighbor should be used to measure the level of PM 2.5 in the air hyperlocally in the yards of near neighbors of indoor residential wood burners. If PM 2.5 levels exceed World Health Organization standards of 5 micrograms per cubic meter annually, then that evidence of air pollution from wood burning should lead to the shutdown of that indoor residential wood burning appliance, one appliance at a time if necessary.